But when you think about it, Courtney, everything that comes with this is going to be a decision that an athlete's going to have to make. And so from your perspective, from the perspective of TeamAltemus and all the work that you're doing, kind of where should that process start for student athletes?
It needs to start before the beginning. The student athlete needs to do a full self-reflection and understand what their personal values are, understand what their goals are, and then see if those values and goals align with all the responsibilities that come along with name, image, and likeness compensation. Everybody's talking about the money. That's what we all talk about and we love to talk about. And this has been such a hot topic for so long. I think it almost feels like a foregone conclusion that student athletes are just going to jump in. But they already have 2 full-time jobs, student and athlete. And if they decide to engage in name, image, and likeness opportunities, that will likely become a 3rd full-time job. So that whole self-analysis, and this really gets into our due diligence piece. I mean, not only is it important to do due diligence on external professionals, but it needs to start with self. And so that's really the first decision. And I know it's going to be somewhat overlooked in a lot of different places because, like I said, it's just a foregone conclusion, but it's so important. And it's a repeatable process that they'll start with, this self-reflection. It's not only going to help them related to name, image, and likeness, it's going to help them as a student. It's going to help them learn more about themselves, where they want to study, in what areas, why to apply themselves to certain subject areas more than others, and really start thinking about what is that career whenever that athletic career, the competitive athletic career, is over. So they need to do that, and then they need to really study, okay, if I want to do this and this aligns with my values and I want to make money because I want to have $100,000 before I leave college, or I want to have my whole college paid for if I'm not a scholarship athlete, do they have time for it? What are their time management skills? How do they manage their time? What is that going to look like? They have to map that out, or else everything could fall apart. The student part, the athlete part, and name, image, and likeness. And it could be a disaster all the way around, which is obviously not the goal. So once they have that first sort of process of self-analysis done, and they've decided whether to participate or not, they can then move forward into the other areas. But Luke, you and Anomaly talk about this decision-making process. So once they've done the self-analysis, how do they use your formula to actually make that decision? Am I going to participate or not?
Yeah, I think, you hit the nail on the head, Courtney, when you talk about having a repeatable process, right? I think, athletes are so used to having a repeatable process for what do they do when they step up to the foul line? What do they do when they hear, the quarterback make a count? Like they're trained in that process. So this should be no different. And being able to have a repeatable decision-making process is something that can, to your point, be applied as it relates to name, image, and likeness, but so much, in broader terms, and thinking about their life decisions that they have to make. So the process that we go to with athletes that we spend a lot of time in, we use the phrase REAP, R-E-A-P, right? It's this idea that you reap what you sow. And so when we think about that, it's R, recognize the decision, right? What is the decision that you're actually making? Because sometimes you can get such clarity just in really understanding what is the actual decision that I have to make here. E is being able to evaluate information. So now you're able to start pulling information based on that decision that you're trying to make. A, you're analyzing your options, right? So now you've got these various options available to you because you've pulled in all this information. You can bring in other advisors, family members, others who want to weigh in. Now you're giving them some guidance as to how they can help you in making a decision, as opposed to simply like, hey, what do you guys think about this? And it's like, yeah, sure, do it or don't do it, right? It's this idea that, hey, this is the decision I'm trying to make. This is the information I've gathered. Here are my options. What are your thoughts? And now you can go to family members, compliance, professors, mentors, coaches, and others, and bring them into this process. And then ultimately, P is produce a decision. And so when we think about REAP, that's a way, that's something that oftentimes we do in sports, like in a heartbeat, because we've trained to do that in a heartbeat. But what we really want to do now is teach this as a process, so that athletes now can apply that, just like muscle memory, apply that when there are other decisions that have to be made. And name, image, and likeness is going to present a lot of decisions to be made, especially when it comes to, should I take this opportunity or not? Should I hire this potential marketing agent or not? Having a repeatable process is going to help through that.
I love it. Repeatable process. It's not only going to help in these decisions around NIL, but it's going to help them in their everyday lives. And that's exactly how we teach at TeamAltemus as well. We, if you're discussing the process of REAP and you ask student athletes to reflect back on their decision, what school they wanted to go to, likely they and their parents and whoever else they sought help from actually went through the REAP process and didn't know they were doing it. So I think it's a critical point for them to realize that the things they're doing every day are a series of processes, and they don't need to complicate things more. Money and legal issues are very complex. We don't need them to complicate all of this more with getting into the issues, but rather practice these repeatable processes.
That's right. And when you have a process, it helps you to realize that you're not necessarily making a binary decision, right? It's not a, yes, I'm going to do this deal, or no, I'm not going to do this deal. It may very well help you to say, when do I want to start even looking at opportunities, right? Because we already know that if you're in football, in college football, and you have an opportunity presented to you your freshman year, well, you're going to be there for at least 3 years. So, you might want to, your decision-making process may lead you to say, you know what, I'm going to wait. Maybe I'm going to wait until my sophomore year when I've got, much more film on me. I've got more followers. I've developed my brand a little bit better. And then I can, potentially seek additional or higher compensation as opposed to what I'm being offered now. So, but it's having a process that helps you to actually think critically about, all that's going on around you.